Magic.me is the world's greatest school for magic, meditation, and mysticism. You can learn everything there, from chaos magic to hermeticism to meditation to how to supercharge your finances and take absolute control of your destiny. In short, you get all of the tools you need to turn chaos into beautiful, scintillating order and master your life. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show quite a lot. But check it out. It's growing fast. And I just want to say, if you're confused about where to start, because I have so many courses there, the Adept Initiative is the place to go. The Adept Initiative is the flagship course on magic.me, and it contains everything you need to know to master the most profound ancient techniques of changing your consciousness and the most modern and cutting edge tools and systems for absolutely turning your life into a masterpiece. You're really going to dig it. Go check it out, and I will see you in class. It's magic.me, magick.me.
I was raised by a father who my whole life was like, life is work. It's all it is. You gotta toughen up, son. And I'm kind of grateful to a certain degree that I never really took that to heart. I was like, no, there's gotta be a better way than just life is work is everything. And of course I'm disciplined in certain ways. I meditate every day for at least half an hour. I love the bench that you recommended. That was amazing for Dragon Pose. And dieting and exercise I do not know when to push and when to allow. And sometimes a lot of the magical practices seems like a lot of pushing. And sometimes I feel like more of a fool than a magician, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And some of the more sort of like faith-based concepts and teachings are starting to resonate with me a little bit more. And also, I've noticed that some teachers I really resonate with have like love as like a foundation, love and compassion as a foundation to your teachings. And I haven't heard you speak about it much in the Adept Initiative. And so I kind of like slowed down my progress when it got to the black mirror, white mirror part with the journaling. I haven't done that part yet. And I don't know, I was just wondering if you could sort of speak on that, other potential paths of spirituality, or I don't know.
Yeah. So in general, a lot of confusion arises when you compare different spiritual teachings, right? There's a lot to talk about in your question, which is really good and is something that we all kind of face, right? So different spiritual teachers will say different things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they disagree. It generally tends to mean that they are just focusing on different things at a time. And so, there's the classic story of the blind man and the elephant, where they're all, I'm sure you've heard this one. It's a very common story where there's a bunch of blind men, feeling an elephant, and they all say it's something different.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the deal with spirituality. And that's why, by the way, Kabbalah is so critically important. Not because it's the be all end all dispensation in some type of, religious monotheist way, but because it's a diagram that allows you to connect all those things. Example. So you'll go to some teachers or pick up some teachings that are all about love and compassion and everything that you're talking about, right? And being in your heart and being a good person and heart-centered and Christ consciousness and all that. Well, okay. That's Tefereth, right? That's the center of the tree. Yes, that's a critical part of the path, but
if you take the Kabbalistic plan, it's only one of 10 spheres and 32 paths ultimately, right? If you include the tarot paths, as you did when you mentioned the Fool and the Magician, right? Which is a perfect case in point here. You said sometimes you feel like the Fool, sometimes you feel like the Magician. Well, you're both. And sometimes you need one and sometimes you need the other. But the point is not to hammer on one. The point is to be the whole thing. So another case in point, you'll go to some teachers, like Buddhist teachers, for instance, and they will be talking about the void and emptiness and how everything is empty of inherent meaning. Well, what are they talking about? I mean, if you look at it from the Kabbalah, they're talking about the Ein Sof, right? Beyond Kether, the emptiness, the void, right? Then you go to Hindu teachers and they'll talk about the one and all is one. Well, how do you reconcile that, right? Are they both wrong? Are they both right? Well, maybe there's the monist teachers, the Vedantic teachers are talking about Kether, right? So just because they're positing Kether, the oneness of everything, doesn't mean that all the other spheres don't exist, and doesn't mean that the Buddhists are wrong. The Buddhists are just focusing on a different thing, Ein Sof, which is beyond Kether. And it's not even necessarily that one is better than the other, right? They're all looking at the same ground plan, floor plan of reality, perhaps, and choosing to focus on different things. And for me, when I understood that cleared up a lot. And I don't know when I actually don't know when I got that. At some point, it just made sense to me, having been through so much of this stuff for so many years, where I realized, oh, they're all just looking at different parts of the tree.
My teacher has said all saints, emanate a different type of divinity, almost unique type of divinity, and I like that. But there's an aspect of me that sees this kind of darkness and the need to constantly push, and like I'm not enough. I need more, and I'm running out of energy for that. I hope if and when I find my true will, or what my gifts are, or what resonates with me, it'll be more of a downhill, or at least pushing a boulder across an even plane instead of the Sisyphus-like thing. But I'm also concerned about crystallizing my ego into like a spiritual ego, or I think what's been Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which was a very cold book to me. I believe he called it egohood, demonic egohood, and sort of selfishness. I don't know. Things I'm concerned about.
Right. So in terms of the true will, okay, let me go through one bit at a time, because
it's a lot. I know. Sorry.
Well, but these are all great questions, right? So, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently. So it's like the need to constantly push, right? Is that spirituality or is that capitalism? Right? It's like that's something we've absorbed from our culture, because we've all been raised for, most of us probably have been raised for multiple generations within, our families within a capitalist context, where we're essentially seen as our labor value, right? And so it makes sense that, and of course, capitalism is, as many have pointed out, the child of Protestantism and the Protestant work ethic. And so you have a lot of writers on magic, particularly Aleister Crowley, come from an extremely rigid Protestant background. So I don't think that's a mistake that when you read, I don't think it's a surprise when you read, for instance, Crowley's writing, his early writing, where it very much reflects his exclusive brethren upbringing or Protestant upbringing, and this like almost punishing attitude towards the self. That's not explicitly Protestant, by the way. It is probably in Christianity a lot, although it's in other religions. It's certainly in Catholicism. If you look at the Jesuits, right, very much, very, very self-punishing. But you look at Crowley's writing later, and when he really starts to talk about the true will, the thing he says, the closest analog in Eastern spirituality is the Tao, and being in flow with the Tao, right, which is the opposite, right? It is not trying. I would define being one with the Tao as not being a tryhard, right? And just being as you are. So, but this is very, this is a very confusing and stressful point, particularly for new students, because I think I've talked about this before on calls. When you go to masters of anything, it does with spirituality or whatever, martial arts, let's say, let's take Bruce Lee as an example I often use. They will tell you, oh, you must be effortless. Well, Bruce Lee's saying that you have to be effortless and be one with the Tao after, 20, 30 years of brutal training. It's the same with jazz musicians who just say, oh, you just flow with it. Well, it's like, great. You had how many decades of classical training? So again, I come back to this idea of looking at things as different nodes in one map, as in the Kabbalah. It's like, well, these things are true at different times. In the early grades, yeah, you need to push yourself very, very hard because you have no idea what you're doing. You have a lot to learn. If you're taking the Hermetic path, you need to learn Hermeticism, Kabbalah, Hebrew. You need to learn yoga. You need to learn the history of the thing. You need to learn all these different code stacks, essentially, and physical rigor, physical discipline, the rigor of physical discipline, let alone, in addition to the actual learning that you're doing, you have to go through all the ordeals of learning magic. And there's a lot. There's the social stigma. There's the changes in your life. There's facing things about yourself that you may not feel that you're ready to face. There a lot happens, right? There's the pain of having to let go of and cut off things that actually don't serve you. That's not necessarily pleasant. So there's a lot that you have to go through, and there's a lot you have to go through to get to a point where it can be more effortless, where not trying is trying. But even then, it can be easy for people to delude themselves and say, well, I'm magical based on the way that I live my life and I don't need to do anything. Well, maybe they've fallen into complacency. How do you say, right?
Yeah, I can't. There's nothing really else that matters to me all that much about other than, I don't know, being intangible, lost in God versus conquering oneself and giving oneself up to God. To quote Soul of the Desert by Aleister Crowley. I love that poem.
How are those different?
One feels like dissolving straight up from the get-go, where you're letting go of things. And one feels like, to me, like you're realizing that all these desires that you're creating don't fulfill you, and that, God's desire or, the true will is the only path, and by, getting all these things that you realize you don't actually want, and you thought you want at first, you realize what you truly want, which is, God's will or whatever. Because I'm with my desires, I'm realizing that a lot of these things aren't what I truly want. And so I don't have a whole lot of motivation for a lot of worldly, earthly things. I mean, I own a business and I'm more interested in, getting my employees to communicate better with each other and talk to them about what they're dealing with, instead of oh, I'm just going to do it myself, getting them to help each other and have empathy for each other. And my business is flourishing in a lot of ways, but there's also the balance of that drive to get parts out and do all this, do the work, right?
What is your business?
We manufacture custom wire rope. It's a family business. I have a biology degree. It's not my thing, but it's a great opportunity to learn leadership,
cool.
Which it is.
Very cool. Yeah. Being a boss is hard.
Yeah. And I'm a fool. I feel more like a fool than a pusher. So it's a weird dichotomy. It really is.
Well, this is something that I'm having to learn as well. I mean, it's interesting. It's like when you get to a point in your life where you're in a leadership position, all of a sudden you have to stop doing everything yourself. And I'm so used to, for so many years, just okay, I'll do it myself. And that becomes, what can be. Again, it comes back to seeing things as a process and different at different times in your life. What can be a real boon to you earlier in your life, which is being so bullheaded that you decide that you'll do everything yourself, that can really free you. But ultimately, it becomes a blockage because one person can only do so much, and you have to let go to other people to do things. You know, you have to lead other people to do things, right, at a certain point. Otherwise, you can go no further. It's really tough.
Yeah, and it allows you to do more of higher level things that you need to be doing when you allow someone else to take the reins for other things that are trying to fall off your back, but you won't let them, right?
Totally. Yeah, and easier said than done, because sometimes people don't do a very good job, you know?
My mom is the controller. She's very good at it. And she will go through QuickBooks and all these things, be like, look, you have to look at all these charts all the time, every day. You have to be really interested in all this information. I'm like, I'm not going to make any decisions based upon this information. So why do I need to look on it? Orders are coming in. We're getting good quotes for these orders, and I need to focus on my people and the processes. So, but I think there's a balance there. You know, I'm just, and I wonder if how much I'm railing against my dad's, you know, thing about life is work and how I can kind of heal that part of me.
Well, that would be a deeper question, right?
Yeah. I'm trying. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this. Is the part that makes you uncomfortable, is it seeing life through the lens of work that is the issue, or the type of work that it was meant?
It feels like I have a broken wing. It feels like when I push, like I have a pulled muscle or something. And naturally, if you're lifting weights and you have a pulled muscle, you stop pushing. And I keep kind of running into that. So I'm trying to do some more easier things. There's things I'm not lazy about at all, but I don't know. Maybe it's some kind of depression. I have no idea.
What did work mean to your dad? Or what did it mean to him?
You're gonna have to work hard. He started the business. He created this thing, right? You're gonna have to work hard every day.
So you're still in your dad's business then. So it's still done. Whatever his metaphor for life is certainly dominates your life then.
What's important about the business seems to me, and what I'm telling myself is this is going to help me learn leadership so I can start a permaculture farm / community someday and create something that brings resources up from the earth and sustainably creates its own resources instead of just hammering out parts to keep the system moving. Okay. I would like to be of service to the whole ecosystem instead of just capitalism. But I don't know.
So you would like to be your own person, and your current position, you feel you have framed at least, is giving you skills to do that, but ultimately is holding you back, perhaps.
Yeah. And there's projects that I start and don't finish, that are kind of passion projects, because I don't know, it seems like there's like paper walls and feels like that if I apply a little bit of pressure, I do break through some things, and then it is easier on the other side. But I just don't know if it's a concrete wall or a paper wall. And I'm tired of beating my head against the wall. Just so sick of it.
When you're beating your head against the wall, are you trying to get to your permaculture project or sidetracking?
I am trying to develop a will to be good enough.
Good enough by whose standards?
The crazy people who think money equals happiness that are constantly influencing me in my life, I think.
So you're fitting yourself to somebody else's standard for what your life should be.
I've given up on it for the most part, but there's still
you haven't, because you just said that you do it consistently. So
I feel guilty sometimes. Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, in a certain sense, this is the position that all Magic.me students are in, right? Which is they're in a position that they feel is not close to. They would like to be in a life situation that is more in alignment with who they really are, right? And that's it across the board, whatever the specifics are. Right. And there's a lot to deal with there. I mean, when we talk about, we can use these esoteric terms like the true will, right? Which I think is a good one. But let's put it in plain English for living in late capitalist 2022 Western culture, right? Most of the students are American, some are not. We have a lot of expectations on us from our society, from what we can broadly call capitalism, from family, from all this, from peers, from social media. There's a lot of noise telling us to not be who we are. And that noise can be so loud that sometimes we even forget completely who we are. And that's why meditation is important, so that you can calm down long enough to remember and listen. Right? Without a discipline, sometimes our life is, our situation that we're in is just so loud that you're never going to be able to reconnect if you don't explicitly make time and space, ritual space, if you will, to reconnect to what you already know to be true. Hence this wacky thing, magic and meditation and all of that. But what are we really trying to do? We have an image. I think that all of us have an image within ourselves, and sometimes we don't know where it comes from, which is where it becomes something sacred, perhaps, of what we know to be true and what we really want to be doing with our life. And that can be at odds with family, society, friends, everything. Funnily enough, why that is, maybe that's just how it is. I mean, maybe it's that life requires that in order to make you strong enough to actualize your goal. Maybe, I don't know. But a problem arises. We're all so smart. The issue isn't that none of us are not, we're all intelligent. The issue is not that we're not intelligent enough or strong enough or capable enough to fulfill the dream. Because if you have the burning desire, then you have the means to do it, right? If you apply yourself. So the issue is not that we're not smart enough or good enough. The issue is that we're so smart and so good that we can convince ourselves that other things that we can do, either that other things are true, or that we can do 17 things at once. Right? That's the issue. We're so smart that we can outsmart ourselves. That tends to be the blockage for people, right? And it's difficult because our society requires so much of us, requires us to be so technically proficient in so many different things just to get through the day. I mean, even to talk about QuickBooks, I mean, QuickBooks is a huge skill, right? But like, how many of those skills have you had to deal with, not just as a business owner, a business owner, for God's sake, which is a whole other ratcheted up level of it, but just in your life, going through school and jobs and things like that, your phone, we're required to become cybernetic individuals in so many ways. Cybernetic in the true sense, not of merging just with machinery, but merging with all these huge systems outside of ourselves that A, we're just expected to pick up, and B, maybe have only existed for like 3 or 4 years. And so we live in a loud time, and it wasn't always like that. We used to live in quiet times where it was just the cycles of nature and farming.
Like a permaculture farm.
Exactly. Right. So, and I think it's no surprise that so many people have taken an interest in permaculture or previous iterations of it, because it's such a perfect metaphor for trying to reconnect with self. Now, it's probably really freaking hard. So it's more involved than just reconnecting to a state of nature. I mean, this is what people learned in the 60s. It's like farming is hard. But that aside, I think that what I'm hearing from you in general is basically what I hear from everyone in our society, which is everyone who's feeling and conscious, which is I have a image for myself of where I would like to be, which is what I feel is close to who I truly am. And that is at odds with where I currently am. And that makes me unhappy. And I can recontextualize my unhappiness by saying that I am training to do that. I'm learning skills that I need to do this other thing in the future, which may be true. But nonetheless, there is a disconnect. And that disconnect can be so overwhelming and so infuriating and impossible seeming that people are willing to do things like look into the occult to fix it.
Mm-hmm. I'm also concerned that if and when I get there, it's just going to be another thing that I realize I didn't want. But that being aside, I'm wondering if you could just, I don't want to take everyone else's time, but I have just one question that I'm curious about. In your experience, is there a sort of dark, obsessive, overly controlling aspect of the human condition that can develop into kind of a narcissistic, sociopathic, quote, evil? It might just be ignorance or something like that. It might not necessarily be bad, or it could be a choice someone wants to make if they want to live their life that way. But do you notice a dichotomy like that exists in the universe of good and evil, or is that a relative argument?
Are you talking about a specific person?
I am not talking about it. I'm talking about something I noticed inside myself and inside others that is selfish in nature.
Sure.
That is, I got to do this only by me. It's only me. I can't trust anyone. I'm scared and I need to fight everything and everyone. That kind of mentality versus the like loving, accepting, faithful kind of Christ consciousness mentality.
Well, I go back to, just practically speaking, I go back to kind of what I was saying at the beginning, which is you're noticing all these things that are different parts of the human condition and different parts of the human soul. What is to say that one is good, A, that something is wrong, or that B, these things are not appropriate at different times, right? Because Christ consciousness and being accepting and loving may be very appropriate in certain contexts, and being completely self-protective may be very appropriate in other contexts. So I'm very much of the mindset that all of this stuff exists and all of it is useful in different contexts. And I don't want to cut off any part of being human because ultimately it's all part of the ride.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's maybe becoming imbalanced that in any way that could be potentially dangerous or whatever.
Well, absolutely. Right. And again, this is why I return to something like the Kabbalah, which is if you have a ground plan, then you can understand where things are out of balance and where things can be brought into balance, and where perhaps you're overloaded on one side. So you're describing a controlling state, which goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is the fool and the magician, right? So you have too much of the magician and not enough of the fool. But you can have too much of the fool and not enough of the magician. So the point is to bring them into balance, which is very much the Tao, which is very much the true will. It is coming into harmony and balance, right? But not being out of balance or cutting anything off, right? And this is why, you look at Taoist masters are usually drunk and crazy and all of this stuff, it's like, but they're making a point there, which is life, as Leibach said, life is life. You don't force it to be something that it's not, or go too far in the other direction, which is try to be transcendent perhaps. I mean, we're living it for a reason.
Yeah. I'm slowly realizing that, I think. Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
Thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate it.
Hang in there. I hope you get to your permaculture.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it seems like the steps are happening. It seems like I'm learning things that I need. There's people at work that, were angry, really angry, wouldn't talk about things, wouldn't open up about things. And they are starting to, and I'm getting really good at helping them process some of these things. And I think if I'm going to live in a community with other people, like that's a necessary skill. Otherwise, that place is going to be hell.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's why I would never do it. But all power to you. It's like the first time somebody doesn't do their dishes, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah. Well, that's why the connection and compassion is crucial. Otherwise, it won't work.
Yeah. Well, it's a good time for it. So I wish you great luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so yeah, I did touch on some of the things that I've got on my mind. I kind of already know what you're going to say, but at the moment I'm going through like a withdrawal process from kratom addiction.
Okay.
And it's been from just during the COVID time, really, because I've been stuck at home with my family.
I've taken a lot of kratom, so.
You have?
Yeah.
I've just, as soon as I started it, I wasn't able to stop. And
even though it tastes that bad.
Capsules.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never did the capsules. It's just like it's the worst. Oh God. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, I just, I was at a point where I was just taking mouthfuls, and being like, hey, just really amazingly talkative at work, and found everything really easy. Same with my family. And, I'm just spending too much money on it. And I finally come to the point where, I've had to just deal with it and come off it. So this sort of thing started like 4 years ago. I lost my mum. It was around about the time I found you, actually, and started, started your courses. So yeah, I've been sort of on and off self-medication since then, really. Initially I had like amazing lucid dreams where it was almost impossible to write everything down and know what was going on. I was waking up within dreams and then still waking up and just never ending kind of waking up process where it felt realer than real. But now what I'm going through is just a complete emptiness where I can't feel any of them, like the magic or the mystery. And it's funny because you were mentioning the atheist stuff, because currently I'm usually very, the whole kind of last 4 years has kind of made me, like, I've gone through an existential crisis, and I just haven't been able to commit to the atheism thing. There's something stopping me, and that's what I like. But recently, it's kind of just full on atheist, and I'm a little bit lost, and I don't like it at all, because when it comes to my kids, I have to explain to them what I think will happen, or what will happen to them. They're already pretty kind of downbeat about it, and they're watching that stupid program, the Ted Danson one.
Cheers?
No, the one where The Good Place, about the where they go, she's in heaven. Oh, she's actually in hell. It's on Netflix.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I only know Cheers, where everyone knows your name.
It's a trashy show, but they're asking about death all the time. And
are you talking about they're reacting to COVID?
Well, no, COVID is one thing, but they had a kind of funny reaction to COVID, but they're terrified about me dying. They're very aware of mortality because of my mum. And I'm just a bit upset, really, that I've lost this kind of very solid sense of spirituality, and it's now just completely gone. And I'm not quite sure how to pick it up again.
Do you think that has something? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just with the withdrawal process, I feel nauseous all the time.
Yeah,
I've been taking it for about a year now, so it's not easy to come off at all. And I've got support groups that have been helping me.
You said you've been withdrawing for a year, or you were taking?
No, I've been sort of slowly. I've had this kind of support group helping me with sort of lower the doses.
Okay.
But it's kind of bullshit at the end of the day, because I'll have a day where I'll just be, oh, fuck this. And I'm taking all sorts of things, really. But, I've just come to a point where I want to stop it all, really, and start from scratch. But I always feel like I'm starting from scratch. That's the problem. I've been following you for years now, and I've had phases where I'm really in the groove, and my creative work is just like, I've got so much. I'm so grateful to you, basically, for
thank you,
freeing a lot of that, just bringing it out of me, and I don't even have to think about it, and that's the kind of thing I like to do. And now it's that kind of thing where I'm overthinking things, and my brain is just completely blank, and I just feel nauseous and blank. I'm not quite sure where to take it from here.
You're probably just going through opiate withdrawal. I mean, go easy on yourself. I mean, your brain's resetting, right? It's like opiate withdrawal is a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not heroin, but it's an opiate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I think that I don't think it would be surprising if you felt unenthusiastic about things.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just wondering if you had any advice about where to pick it up, because at the moment meditation feels like shit.
Yeah. Well, so you're basically on a maintenance dose, or you're not cold turkey?
No, I've stopped.
You're cold turkey. How long have you been stopped?
I mean, I've been reducing now for the last few months, but I just decided, my wife was giving me too much grief about it, and giving me these really patronizing YouTube videos with some douchebag talking about it as if, really basic stuff. And I'm just like, I'm kind of taking about, 10 times what this guy's talking about. And she, didn't quite realize what I'm going through.
How long have you been completely off?
Only like about 10 days.
Okay. Yeah. That's not very long.
No. Yeah.
So I would, well, look, I mean, you're going through biochemical processes. I mean, look, I mean, like, let's be honest. I mean, like, life isn't going to feel as good as it does on opiates. There's a reason why people like them.
Yeah.
It's like opiates are the cure for pain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when you're off them, it's not like it's going to be butterflies and roses. You know what I mean?
I don't know how to readjust reality.
It's well, I mean, there's a reason why people stay. I have always found kratom awesome and opiates in general very good for managing emotional pain.
Yeah,
but it's a slippery slope, obviously. And my friends, I've had many. Obviously, you can't overdose on kratom, which is very good. But I've lost many friends to heroin overdoses. And what I've observed is, I mean, this is kind of similar, but not really, even though they're both opiates. But with opiates, you're putting yourself in suspended animation rather than processing things.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. Although sometimes I always found it actually can be somewhat helpful to at least have a momentary period of lessening the emotional stress so you can breathe.
Yeah.
But, as we know, when you're addicted to opiates, your brain stops producing them. So the reason why it's so difficult to quit them is because life is like 10 times more agonizing when you come off it, because you're not producing your own natural shit. It's a biochemical deficiency. So, particularly with heroin addiction, it's like brutal. I mean, it's like people have described it to me as like, they're sitting there with no skin and they can feel hair growing out of their bones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've had it already with tramadol. I don't know if you've heard of that. Yeah. But I mean, when my mum died, she had a whole care package, and I just I tried the lot, and it was liquid morphine, oxycodone, and I kind of got a taste for it, and obviously, wasn't. It was had a limited supply, luckily, so I was obviously going to run out. But as soon as I found tramadol, I found it was like exactly the same. I know it's a kind of weak version.
The same as kratom or liquid morphine.
The reason I got into kratom was because I heard it was a great way to get off tramadol.
Yeah, it probably is, but it's also a great way to get on kratom.
And I didn't realize at the time that kratom would be a fucking nightmare as well.
Well, this is the opiates merry-go-round, you know?
Yeah.
It's like methadone is a nightmare. Like
swallowing a fly and eating a spider to swallow the fly.
Oh, yikes.
It feels like that.
Well, I'll share. I'll share just a few thoughts. One is I wouldn't be hard on yourself because you're going through an inescapable biochemical process of your brain rebooting. It's like, you know, like I've had periods of coming off addictions that have, you know, not opiate addictions, but other addictions that have lasted a long time, and you just have to suffer through it, and it's not cool, and it's like it sucks, and there's always the temptation. Well, if I just did a little bit, all of this would go away. I'll say it, obviously. The only thing that I don't necessarily think you're you're not necessarily in this boat, but I know with heroin addicts, often the thing that I've heard is the one thing that does the trick is ibogaine, which you may be familiar with.
Say again.
Ibogaine.
Ibogaine.
Yeah.
No, not
so ibogaine is an African psychedelic.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of in the same boat as ayahuasca, but it's something totally different. And it's not necessarily pleasant, but I know the one thing I think Burroughs said as well, it was the only thing that actually helped him quit. And I've had heroin addict friends who've been able to kick their addiction with ibogaine. I also know people in the Navy SEALs who went in and decided they didn't want to kill people anymore. It causes a serious life review. It lasts about 24 hours. I've never done it, so I can't say. You can do it in Mexico. I know people. I'm in the UK. I know people that can, shamans that. That couldn't do a proper ayahuasca. Yeah. Shamans, aka house producers. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm on antidepressants, so okay. I don't think they're compatible, unfortunately.
I don't know.
I've heard that you can't be on antidepressants if you do ayahuasca, but
well, this is something else. This is a totally different plant. But
okay. I'll look into ayahuasca.
That. The other thing I would say is, just to directly answer your question about spiritual practice, I will say this. My observation and experience, I am like have no judgment whatsoever about drugs. I've done a fucking ton of them. Right. So someone I met has more than the 10 years ago on the statute of limitations, mind you. But there's a reason why there's many reasons why people do drugs. One of them is obviously there can be a need to escape emotional or physical pain. But one of them also is an attempt at transcendence. It's an attempt to get closer to a godlike feeling, or what Freud would call an oceanic or womb-like feeling, things like this. So there's a very valid impulse behind it. The problem is the addictive nature and the side effects of the substances themselves, which has nothing to do with morality or ethics and everything to do with chemistry, right? And the quality of what you're getting. So, and just whether you can maintain a functional life. So in my experience, the world of spirituality in general is filled with recovering addicts, Buddhism in particular, but also the meditation, things like this. And what I realized is a very functional truth, which is one of the reasons why is it's not this Christian thing of, oh, like I found Jesus and now I'm saved, you know.
they're looking for a better way to get high. And that's good, in my opinion, right? So I think all of the reasons to do drugs are largely valid. It is valid to not want to be in pain. Okay? Like it's valid. Like this whole idea that people have of like, oh, you just have to suffer and like bear your cross. It's like, you know, it's like, it's valid to not want to be in pain of any type. It's valid to just want to feel good. It's valid to want to transcend and explore past yourself and just experiment with yourself. These are all things that we see animals doing in nature all the time. You know, like one thing that Jen used to point out to me is like all animals in nature look for a way to get high. Even stick insects try to get high. So obviously dolphins and monkeys, things like this, the more intelligent they are, the more they try to get fucked up. It's the same with people also, I think. But the best way to move past the chemical dependency is to find something that works better. And in my experience, pranayama is better. And when I say better, if you push pranayama to its limit after about, I would say, a year of practice, you can generate opiate hits that feel like heroin naturally in your brain. Mm-hmm. Pretty good trick.
Yeah.
So, and then there's no withdrawal and it's free. So my functional approach to addiction is find something cleaner and better. It's not, like suck it up buttercup or whatever, you know, like people have this like this punitive approach to it. It's like, well, it's just, you know, it's a purely practical matter of like, well, what you're doing has side effects that you don't want. So let's try a different approach. And in my experience, meditation, when you really push meditation, Raja Yoga, also Vipassana, Buddhist and Hindu meditation, pranayama, asana, dharana, or Vipassana, it's better from a purely ecstatic standpoint. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, brilliant. Well, it all feels like shit at the moment, but
yeah,
good place to start.
But well, I mean, I that's probably you know, I mean, you can try and meditate through it, but it's probably going to feel like shit for a while, and it's just how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just wanted to hear you say it, to be honest.
Say what?
Well, hear your thoughts.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm listening to you a lot, and you know, it all makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, good luck. I mean, look, like I've taken a lot of kratom. It's really good for managing emotional pain. It fucks up your sleep. I found it even if I slept on it, I wouldn't be asleep all night like you were saying, and I'd always be exhausted. And it's an opiate, and you know, taking drugs has a really negative effect on your relationships and the people around you. Even if, you know, you don't think it does, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, at least it's not heroin. But good luck. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. All right.
All right, awesome. Good to see you.
You too.
So I have one quick, like, practical question, and then one more bigger question. The quick one is, so for Raja, when you get to dharana, but prior to that, I've been using like a metronome ticker for my breath counting. Is it still like a good idea to use that when you're trying to get that single point of focus? Because sometimes I feel like it's distracting, just like hearing the noise. Maybe when I get better at it, it fades out.
Yeah. So you're using the metronome for pranayama?
Yeah. Just to count the breathing. Like,
okay.
You know, 10 in, 20 out.
Very good question, which shows me you're actually practicing, which is very good. So here's how it goes. Raja Yoga should be built step by step. So that means, practically speaking, that you start with asana, and that may take you a year to master. Obviously, you're measuring, and there's kind of a different measuring device, at least as recommended by Crowley. You may come up with your own. I haven't seen others. Well, the classic Hindu ones are mala beads and things like that. But there are recommended measuring devices at each. So with asana, at least when you start to master it, the measuring device is a bowl of water on your head filled to the brim with surface tension. Okay, so you got to get asana down first. You don't want to do everything all at once. It's too much. It's too much. Asana is hard. It's a pain in the ass, literally. So you got to get that. You got to get through that. Pranayama, you got to get through too. That's its own process. And when you're doing pranayama, you have to have already mastered asana to do. I mean, you don't have to, but if you're doing it properly, you have to do asana and then pranayama. When you're doing pranayama, you do the counting. By the time you get to dharana, the counting doesn't. You should have embedded the sequence deeply enough that you don't need to worry about the specifics of counting. The idea with the counting is that it forces you not to cheat, and also it gives you a quote unquote scientific basis where when you put your results in your record, you know for sure you were doing a certain amount. It takes out the margin for error, right? Also, when you're doing, particularly when you get to kumbhaka, where you're holding in breath for long periods of time, there's a very strong impulse to just speed up your counting, particularly when you're under stress, to get out of it. So that's what the ticker corrects for, and it's a very good addition on Crowley's part, I think. So for dharana, the counting device, so you don't need it for dharana. Close enough is good enough with dharana if you're doing pranayama, but you may not necessarily be doing pranayama during dharana. You may just do asana in dharana, which actually is the classical way to do it, in which case you don't need to worry too much about the pranayama. You can do it with pranayama as well, but honestly, I think one way you may want to investigate it also is, particularly once you've spent like a year on pranayama and you've been through all the stages and the purification stages and all of that, it'll take you much less time to get into gnosis or trance or whatever you want to call it. So what you may want to consider doing as one approach is asana, 10 minutes of pranayama, and then dharana in afterwards.
Okay.
In asana.
Yeah,
So
I've messed around, because when I started having like a bit of confusion about where to go from here, I did try just to turn off the timer and just breathe deeply and just focus on the point more than the breathing. And that was, I got a different result, obviously.
Was it how was the result different?
I just found that I could, the senses were drawn way more finely to that point, instead of, with the ticker and then the breathing, and, I'm trying not to go too far with like the stress from the breathing, but I'm trying not to be too easy, just so I can, increase my breathing. So without that and like the intense like focus on breathing, found dharana was easier to try to lock in, just without the ticker and everything else.
Got it. How long have you been practicing for?
So I did your Adept initiative around this time last year, and I was like, freshly sober and wild and didn't finish. So now I started this time around at the end of October, and have been taking it a lot more seriously. So since about then. Great.
So you're new, because it's October to how many? That's 4 months or so, something like that. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't worry about it too much. You need probably like 9 months at least at each stage.
Okay.
I would say, depending on frankly how athletic you are naturally. So if you are an athlete, it's going to be easier for you because it's quite physically strenuous. But that said, I mean, look, I've talked to I have a friend who was in SEAL Team 7, and he couldn't take asana. It was too much for him. And the workouts that those guys do, I've read them, they're insane. So So it just takes time. It's very doable. It just takes time and slow, persistent effort, because you're forcing your body to do something new that it doesn't naturally want to do. Ironically, sitting still is not natural for your body, right? So it actually is. Your body just doesn't want to do it. So just take your time at each stage, and don't try to rush into combining things. To spend your time on each part to get it right before going on to the next bit. That will, because each one, I mean, look, like in a sense, each one contains the other, right? Asana contains essentially pranayama, because you have to modulate your breathing. You're not doing alternate nostril breathing, but you have to modulate your breathing in order to get through it. It also contains dharana, because you have to focus on holding the posture and not drifting, particularly in Godasana, where your knees will drift apart. It contains dhyana, because it's single-pointed focus on one goal. Right, pranayama contains asana. Obviously, it contains pranayama. It also contains dharana, because you're and dhyana, because you're single-pointedly focusing on the task. And the same with dharana. So each practice contains the others, but they're honed at higher degrees at each stage. So very similar to magic. So just take your time with it. It's not a race. And slow and steady efforts are much. You don't want. This is not something you want to rush with. Of all the things in magic, yoga is the one to take your time with. There are parts where you begin to understand your own capacity, where you do want to push yourself, but even then, the name of the game is slow, persistent efforts, right? Because let me just ask you this. I mean, like, what's better? 18 months of slow, persistent effort, little bits at a time, even 15 minutes a day, and by the way, with pranayama, when you're increasing your breathing, you might only increase it 1 second on each side at a time. You don't jump from each stage. You can go up a few seconds at a time. You can blend in between them. So what's better, 18 months of slow, persistent effort to get to your goal, or 6 months, or even 3 months where you're pushing yourself like crazy, and then you kind of blow out and you don't want to do it anymore, and then you don't pick it up again for 7 years.
Yeah.
So
the 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And then, if you don't mind, I had like a bigger sort of true will question.
Sure.
So in the adept, I think it's in the second or first week or something, but there's, you advise to like sit down and really just kind of focus on not quite doing the Raja, but just meditating on your true will and like see what comes to mind, or journal about it. And both last time and this time, slightly different, but they were both, the things that just kept coming to me were like artistic pursuits, which is like, it confuses me, because I've always been very interested in that stuff, but never really pursued any of it, and was sort of culturally driven by my surroundings away from stuff like that. And also I tell people this, like being an addict and stuff, like my entire formative years were filled with, getting high. And so I didn't, there was no other kind of drive other than that, just the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to play like catch up with that almost. But so it's scary to think of like that my true will is this thing that I never have really gotten to practice on, that I really like. But it's like a scary jumping off point in something that I'm not really that familiar with. And that's been sort of, they're like, no, don't do that. It's a bad idea. No money in that, and all those kind of, tropes. But so I wonder if I'm tricking myself into just what I want to do, or if it is actually part of my true will that's coming up.
No, you're not tricking yourself. What were you addicted to, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
Just, the two basics, alcohol and a lot of weed, and then, whatever else I could throw on top of there.
Okay. But were you actually addicted to other substances besides those two?
No, I wouldn't say so. No.
Okay. It's always good to clarify, because, addiction's a pretty broad range of potential substances. Look, you're super young. I wouldn't worry about it. Lots of people, including myself, do a shit ton of drugs in their early early years. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I would certainly be, your impulse to get clean and get serious with your life is good, because it does become, the longer that goes on, the more of a serious problem it does become. Right. So, and I think you correctly diagnose, it's like the problem is not a moral problem. It's the problem of lost time and wasted potential.
Yeah. 100%.
Which hurts, right? It hurts in a really deep way. So, but the pain is good because it's your higher self telling you, that it's not in alignment, right? It's like a lot of times people want the true will to be roses and everything, but a lot of times the true will manifests as just utter pain, right? But it's good because it's telling, much like asana, because it's like it's your conscience or your soul telling you, it's like, this is not the way. Often this is not the way turns out to be way more important than this is sometimes than this is the way. And there are many times in life when doors are closed for us and it feels unbelievably unfair and vicious. And then we look back and we say, oh, I'm glad I didn't do that. Or, when behavioral patterns become to manifest to us, as at all times in life, I've been going through some of this recently, it's like when we begin to see behavioral patterns that are fucked, right? Particularly in relation with what we're trying to do in our life, and are totally self-destructive and counterproductive, then we have to listen to that, right? So, in terms of, yes, in terms of art and the true will, you are not unique in that at all. This is very common to Magic.me students. Unbelievably common. It's like the drive for art and creation in a society that does not reward it outside of potentially the NFTs. A new thing is happening, right? It's kind of interesting opportunity to jump on. And obviously we're doing that with Magic.me students and just testing the waters and seeing how this crazy new world works. And so that's kind of an interesting development. But this is very common this is one of the reasons that artists are attracted to magic. One, because they see it as a way to, basically it just fulfills all of their needs in a certain way. So, this is the path of the artist, right? Is to make the creative vision strong enough, and the will strong enough that the art is a war in a sense. It's like that it happens because everything's against you as an artist, right? And it's everything's against you in our society. So, you need to, that's very common and definitely something to listen to.
Yeah. And I did an I Ching throw on it. And it was, along the lines of like, oh, keep persisting at this, so there's that as well. There
you have it. Persistence is all. One of my favorite quotes about magic from Dion Fortune, or I think it's from the Golden Dawn, actually. Persistence is all. That says it all in a way. That's true at every level of not only magic, but everything. And I actually quote that. I quote that, if you remember, at the end of Adept Initiative.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, okay. Well, slight spoiler alert, but
no, that's all right.
Yeah, there's persistence is all is quoted from the Golden Dawn. Nothing else takes the place of persistence. Not talent, skill, good looks, money, like where you were born, who your parents were. Nothing. All it is persistence. And the number of people in this world that give up is basically the majority. And sometimes, Crowley's magical motto was "Per durabo, I will endure until the end." Sometimes magic just consists of persisting past, because everything changes in the world, but the true will is the thing that you never let go of. You just keep doing it, no matter what.
Yeah. And it's been like, it's a scary thing to get into because it's just so different from, what I've been raised to do and kind of what I thought I wanted to do and all these things. But, when I got an opportunity to like get into art classes and, someone with music and just all these things have like come up over the past, just since I started doing this again. And I feel like it's silly to ignore those kind of things as well. So it's, it's like reaffirming or like reassuring me that I'm not, tricking myself or being crazy or something like that.
Not at all. I mean, this is the whole key of, it's interesting. I was, and by the way, you're lucky. You're very young. I mean, there's lots of people tons of people who, particularly with art, who come to the place that you're at when they're 55, when they're 60, when they've gone through a corporate career, when their kids are out of the house, or like finally, but then 2/3 of their life potentially is gone or less. So, but it's interesting. I've been reading, I did read this book, Aleister Crowley in England, Tobias Churton's 5th biography of Crowley. And I just did a podcast with him, which will be coming out in a few days. And there's something interesting. There's reproduced in the book Crowley's letters to Parsons, Jack Parsons, and he's just been unbelievably frustrated with Parsons, who's just very immature and off the walls with drugs and bad behavior and not keeping it together. And he has this very telling comment to Parsons where he says, the problem with you is you have this idea, and it says it all. He says that the problem with you is that, to Parsons, that you think you have this idea like, you're going to become rich and famous and successful, and then you can do the work. It's like, it's totally nonsense. What you need to understand, like this is and it's true. What you need to understand, it's like, it's if the work is to be done, if it needs to be done, then you start where you are, and you don't worry about external resources. You don't worry about the world coming around. That's how will is manifested. You just do it, and you don't worry about, and if it is meant to be, if it is your true will, then everything you need will arrive at the time that you need it. And it certainly won't be all at once. It might take decades, right? So, but this is like karma yoga in India. You do what needs to be done without concern of reward. You just do it because it has to be done. And if there's any good definition of the true will, that's kind of a good one. It's that what must be done, no matter, it doesn't matter what the reward is. Right. And this is obviously with artists, the difference between a true artist and somebody who's just, what's a good example? Like Damien Hirst or somebody like that, who's just creating commodities. And there's a lot of artists like that, right? Who's just doing it for the success and the money. Some people are very successful at that, but they're not really artists. They're more like commodities traders. So it's a different job. And if they're good at it, great. If that's what they're meant to do, great. But it's different than true art, I think. So you just start and you do it, and you don't worry about not having resources or the world coming around. Things come around when they need to. That's will. That is magical will. You just do it. You plant a flag in the ground. And I couldn't get anything done in my life until I understood that. It took me a long time to understand that. As when I first started the Ultraculture blog, everything had fallen apart. I'd spent my whole life trying to become parts of other things, like other people's magical worlds or corporate, companies, things like this. And I was able to get a lot of power and use a lot of resources to do things like that in the world, but it never worked out in the end because it didn't come from me. I could always be discarded. So until I finally said, until I'll do this and I will do it by myself. I don't care if my back's to the wall and nobody's on my side. And honestly, that's pretty much how it's been the entire time. So more or less. So it's like until you're on death ground, until it's just like, I'll do this or be killed by it. I don't care. It just has to be done. That's what it takes.
Got it. Well, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
For talking to me.
You're welcome. Hang in there and good luck with what type of art do you do?
So I've just gotten into oil painting and then teaching myself, music on the guitar.
Cool.
So it's been a ton of fun so far. So
very cool. Keep at it.
Thank you.